The first thing I noticed when I pushed open our bedroom door was the pair of polished brown dress shoes beside my work boots, and the second was my wife's hand gripping the edge of our mattress while a man I had never seen before stood between her knees. Neither of them noticed me immediately. The shower was running in the bathroom, music was playing from the little speaker on Vanessa's nightstand, and I was still holding the red plastic toolbox I had brought home because a supply line failure had ended my final job 2 hours early. I stood there in my mud-streaked work pants, staring at a stranger's charcoal suit jacket draped over the chair where I normally left my clothes. Then Vanessa looked past his shoulder and saw me. Her face emptied. Not changed, emptied, as if somebody had pulled a plug inside her. The man turned, and for one absurd second, all three of us remained frozen while Otis Redding sang softly from the speaker. My name is Grant Holloway. I was 37 years old, worked as a licensed plumber in Philadelphia, and until that Wednesday afternoon, I believed I had a stable marriage. Vanessa and I had been together for 11 years and married for 8. We owned a narrow brick row house in Manayunk, had survived a leaking roof, 2 miscarriages, my father's death, and the year her event planning business nearly collapsed. I thought hardship had welded us together. What I had failed to understand was that metal could look solid while corrosion ate it from the inside. Looking back, the warnings had been there for almost 3 months. Vanessa had begun taking calls on our back patio even when the March air was cold enough to turn her breath white. She bought expensive lingerie but never wore it around me. Every Thursday, she claimed she was helping organize corporate dinners at a hotel near Rittenhouse Square, yet she came home smelling less like catered food and more like the sharp cedar cologne now filling our bedroom. Whenever I asked how the event had gone, she answered with one word, "Fine," then found some reason to criticize me. My chewing was suddenly loud. My truck embarrassed her. The clean work shirts I folded on the kitchen chair made our house look cheap. 2 weeks before I caught her, she had stared through an entire dinner at D'Alessandro's without realizing I had asked the same question twice. When I touched her wrist, she pulled away and said, "Can you not be clingy tonight?" I remember sitting across from her with half a cheesesteak in my hand, wondering when affection from your husband had become clinginess. But I trusted her. That was the ugliest part. I kept supplying innocent explanations for behavior she had already stopped bothering to hide. Now, I want you to imagine that bedroom for a second, not the screaming version people picture in movies, but the real one, where your brain notices stupid details because it cannot absorb the larger truth. A loose button lay on our rug. One of Vanessa's earrings had fallen beside the bed. The stranger had placed his silver watch on top of the framed wedding photograph from our trip to Cape May. I could hear the shower water striking the tile, although nobody was in it. My heart hammered so violently that the toolbox handle trembled in my grip. Vanessa finally pushed the man away and snatched the comforter over herself. "Grant," she whispered. He reached for his trousers. I set the toolbox down carefully. That small act frightened them more than if I had thrown it. "What's his name?" I asked. "This isn't," Vanessa began. "Don't insult me twice in the same minute. What's his name?" The man pulled up his pants and said, "Listen, man, I should go." He was perhaps 40, broad through the shoulders, with a wedding band mark visible on his left hand even though no ring was there. I stepped away from the doorway and pointed toward the stairs. "You should." Vanessa stared at me as if she could not understand why I was letting him leave. Maybe she expected fists. Maybe he did too. Instead, I watched him collect his shirt and jacket, descend my staircase half-dressed, and hurry toward a black Audi parked across from our house. I photographed the license plate through the front window before he drove away. Then I returned upstairs. Vanessa had put on her robe and was crying. Not crying from remorse, I realized. Crying because the secret had become inconvenient. "How long?" I asked. "Grant, please sit down." "How long?" It was a mistake. Mistakes happen once. That man knew where we kept the towels. Her mouth opened, then closed. I could taste copper because I had bitten the inside of my cheek hard enough to bleed. My fingers were numb, my stomach felt hollow, and every instinct in me demanded that I smash the speaker, overturn the bed, make enough noise to match what was happening inside my chest. But my father had taught me something during 30 years of fixing old Philadelphia plumbing: when pressure builds behind a wall, swinging a hammer blindly usually floods your own house. Find the valve first. So I made my choice. I would not give Vanessa the explosion she could later use to portray me as unstable. I would not touch her or threaten him. I would learn exactly how deep the pipe had rotted before I cut it out. Get dressed, I said. We'll talk tonight. She blinked at me. That's it? For now. I carried my toolbox downstairs, locked it in my truck, and drove 3 blocks before pulling over beside Pretzel Park. The moment I turned off the engine, my body betrayed the calm face I had worn upstairs. I leaned out of the open door and vomited onto the pavement. Afterward, I sat behind the steering wheel for almost 40 minutes, staring at a child's blue mitten caught in the chain-link fence. I kept hearing Vanessa call our marriage a mistake, although that was not what she had actually said. She had meant the affair. Somehow, my mind already knew she would eventually rewrite the distinction. If you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, you know the pain is not one clean wound. It is hundreds of memories changing meaning at once. Every late meeting became a possible lie. Every kiss before work became camouflage. Every time she had watched me repair something in our house while secretly inviting another man into it made me feel like unpaid labor in my own replacement. I called my cousin Raymond, who handled family law at a small firm in Center City. I did not explain everything over the phone. I only said, I need to know what not to do before I come home. His tone changed immediately. He told me not to leave the house permanently, not to empty joint accounts, not to destroy property, and not to confront the man. Then he asked whether Vanessa knew I was calling him. No. Keep it that way. Come to my office tomorrow morning. When I returned home around 7, Vanessa had transformed the bedroom. The sheets were in the washing machine, the window was open, and the stranger's shoes were gone. She had cooked chicken marsala, my favorite meal, as though butter, wine, and mushrooms could erase what I had witnessed. She sat across from me at the kitchen table with swollen eyes and both hands wrapped around a glass of water. His name is Ethan, she said. Ethan Mercer. He's a client. Married? Separated. How long? She stared at the table. 6 weeks. I knew she was lying because 6 weeks was the kind of answer people chose when the truth was long enough to be unforgivable but short enough to sound like temporary insanity. Did you bring him here before? Twice. Another lie. Ethan had moved through our house without hesitation. His shoes had been placed neatly beside mine, not abandoned in panic. Do you love him? I asked. Vanessa began crying again. I don't know what I feel. I've been unhappy for a long time. There it was, the first brick in the story she planned to build. I had caught her, yet within 4 hours, my work schedule, my muddy boots, and my supposed emotional distance were already being assembled into an explanation. I let her talk. She said I had become obsessed with growing my plumbing business. She said we had stopped traveling. She said Ethan listened to her. She never mentioned that the money I earned had covered nearly $31,000 in losses when her company failed. She never mentioned that I had suggested 3 different trips that year and she had rejected each one because she was too busy. I nodded at the appropriate moments and asked calm questions. She mistook restraint for weakness. By bedtime, she believed she had regained control. I slept in the guest room and heard her whispering on the back patio shortly after midnight. The next morning, I met Raymond before his first appointment. His office overlooked Market Street and smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. I gave him the photograph of Ethan's license plate, a summary of Vanessa's confession, our mortgage documents, bank balances, and copies of the paperwork showing that the row house had been purchased using $86,000 I inherited from my father. Raymond studied everything, then said, "Pennsylvania is an equitable distribution state. Infidelity matters less financially than most people assume, unless marital money was spent on the affair. But evidence still gives you leverage, especially if she lies under oath. Then we find the money." Over the next 10 days, I became the husband Vanessa wanted me to be. I apologized for working too much. I agreed to counseling. I even bought flowers from the stand outside Reading Terminal Market and watched relief spread across her face when I carried them into the kitchen. At the same time, I redirected my business deposits into a new account containing only income earned after Raymond documented our separation date. I copied 3 years of tax returns, downloaded every joint credit card statement, photographed the contents of our safe, and installed a legal exterior camera facing the front steps after 2 packages disappeared from the block. The camera captured Ethan entering our house the very next afternoon while I was supposedly repairing a boiler in South Philly. He stayed 1 hour and 43 minutes. When Vanessa kissed me that evening and asked whether we could start over, I smelled his cedar cologne near her collar. Let me pause here, because this was the moment something inside me permanently changed. I no longer wanted an apology. An apology requires truth, and Vanessa was using my willingness to reconcile as cover to continue humiliating me. From then on, I wanted documentation. The statements gave me more than I expected. Hotel charges had been disguised as event expenses. Vanessa had spent $4,760 from our joint account over 8 months on rooms, restaurants, gifts, and rideshares connected to Ethan. One charge came from a jewelry store on Walnut Street. I had assumed the small gold bracelet she wore every day was something she bought herself. Ethan had paid half through a cash transfer app, Vanessa had paid the rest with our card. Raymond hired a licensed investigator, who identified Ethan as a regional sales director for a medical device company. He was not separated. He lived with his wife and 2 teenage sons in Bryn Mawr. More importantly, his company was one of Vanessa's largest clients, and its ethics policy prohibited undisclosed intimate relationships between vendors and employees who approved contracts. I could have detonated both of their careers that afternoon. I waited. The investigator also discovered that Ethan had promised Vanessa an apartment after he left his wife, although he had never contacted a divorce lawyer or toured a property. He was feeding her a future made entirely of sentences. She was risking a marriage, a home, and a business for a man who had not risked anything except being late for dinner. Then, on the second Friday after I caught them, Vanessa came home carrying a white pharmacy bag. She looked pale and walked directly upstairs. I heard the bathroom cabinet open and close. At dinner, she barely touched her food. "Are you sick?" I asked. "Just tired." At 2 in the morning, after she fell asleep, I noticed the pharmacy receipt protruding from her purse. I did not search deeper. I did not need to. The receipt listed prenatal vitamins. My pulse slowed instead of quickening, which frightened me more than anger would have. Vanessa and I had not slept together in nearly 5 months. There was no uncertainty. The child was Ethan's. The next morning, I watched her spread cream cheese across a bagel while sunlight moved over the bracelet he had helped buy with my money. "Anything you want to tell me?" I asked. Her hand stopped. "About what?" "Your health." She recovered quickly. "I already told you I'm tired." I nodded and drank my coffee. She believed she had escaped again. What she did not know was that Ethan had received the news before breakfast, and by lunchtime, he was already running. He blocked her number, called in sick, withdrew $9,000 from an account his wife did not know existed, and booked a one-way flight from Philadelphia to Phoenix. The investigator sent me a photograph of him entering the airport with one suitcase. Vanessa discovered his disappearance while sitting 6 feet across from me at our kitchen table. Her phone began vibrating, stopped, then vibrated again. She checked the screen, called back, and went rigid when the call went directly to voicemail. She tried a second number. Then email. Then a messaging app. I watched the color drain from her face as the future Ethan had promised collapsed without even granting her a goodbye. She looked up at me, and for the first time since I opened that bedroom door, she seemed genuinely terrified. "Grant," she whispered, placing one protective hand over her stomach, "there's something I need to tell you. I'm pregnant." She said it so quietly that the refrigerator motor almost covered the words. I set down my coffee and looked at the hand resting over her stomach. Vanessa watched my face, searching for whatever reaction would give her the safest path forward. "How far along?" I asked. "Almost 9 weeks. So it's Ethan's." Her eyes filled immediately. Yes. She had probably prepared half a dozen versions of that confession, but none of them included me already knowing the answer. She started talking quickly, telling me she had taken 3 tests, visited a clinic near Chestnut Hill, and tried to reach Ethan because he deserved to know. Then she said the sentence that revealed just how desperate she was. "He must be overwhelmed. He wouldn't simply abandon me." I leaned back in my chair. "He booked a one-way flight to Phoenix yesterday." Vanessa stopped breathing for a second. "How do you know that?" "The same way I know he isn't separated, his wife is still living with him, and you spent nearly $5,000 of our money entertaining him." Her chair scraped backward. "You've been spying on me. You continued bringing him into our house after I caught you in our bed. You said we were working things out." "No, you said that. I let you believe it. Now, I want you to sit with the nerve of that accusation for a moment." Vanessa had lied for months, exposed me to whatever risks Ethan carried, spent marital money on him, become pregnant by him, and continued the affair after being discovered, yet the moment I collected evidence, privacy became sacred to her. That was when I understood that accountability feels like cruelty to people who depend on your ignorance. She stood and pressed both palms against the table. "Where did he go in Phoenix?" "I don't know." That part was true. The investigator had traced the flight, not Ethan's final destination. "Did you contact him? Did you threaten him?" "I never spoke to him." "Then why did he run?" "Maybe because the fantasy stopped being fun once it came with a child and consequences." She flinched. "Don't talk about my baby like that." "Your baby." Yesterday it was important that Ethan deserved to know. Today it's yours because he disappeared. You're being vicious. You haven't seen vicious yet. I did not raise my voice. That was what made her step back. I slid Raymond's business card across the table and told her all further conversations about money, property, or divorce would go through counsel. Her expression shifted from panic to disbelief. "Divorce? Grant, I just told you I'm pregnant and you're talking about divorce? Those two facts are connected." She cried that we had survived miscarriages together and accused me of punishing an innocent child. That cut deeper than I allowed her to see. I had held Vanessa on our bathroom floor after the first loss. I had painted a spare bedroom pale green after the second pregnancy, then repainted it gray when we came home from the hospital without a baby. She knew exactly which wound she was pressing. But the child she was carrying was not responsible for her decisions, and neither was I. "I hope the baby is healthy," I told her. "But I will not raise Ethan's child inside a marriage built on your lies." She stared at me as though I had violated some agreement I never knew existed. Then she grabbed her purse and left. By noon, her mother, Denise, was calling me. Denise did not ask what happened. She launched directly into a speech about forgiveness, hormones, and the importance of giving a child a stable home. Vanessa had told her enough to recruit her, but not enough to make the recruitment difficult. "Did she mention that she continued sleeping with him after I caught them?" I asked. Silence. "Did she mention the money?" More silence. "Did she mention that Ethan is married?" Denise exhaled sharply and said, "People make terrible choices when they feel neglected. Then she can move into your house and feel appreciated. I ended the call. That evening, Vanessa returned with Denise and 2 suitcases, apparently believing her mother's presence would prevent me from enforcing boundaries. Denise marched into the living room and demanded a civilized family discussion. I handed both women printed copies of the hotel charges, the camera stills showing Ethan entering after the supposed reconciliation, and the investigator's photograph of him at Philadelphia International Airport. Vanessa went pale. Denise read the first page twice, then slowly lowered herself onto our sofa. "You told me it ended the day he found out," she said. Vanessa folded her arms. I was confused. "You told me Grant frightened Ethan away." I said I thought he might have. I watched Denise realize that her daughter had used her as a weapon by feeding her a safer version of the truth. She did not apologize to me, but when she left 40 minutes later, Vanessa's suitcases went with her. For the first time in 11 years, I spent an entire night alone in that house. The silence felt enormous. I walked into our bedroom, removed the framed wedding photograph from beneath Ethan's watch mark, and found a faint circular scratch across the glass. I almost threw the frame into the trash. Instead, I placed it face down in a drawer because I wanted to remember that I did not need to destroy evidence of my old life to begin a new one. The legal process moved faster than Vanessa expected because Raymond filed first and arrived prepared. We requested reimbursement for marital funds spent on the affair, preservation of her business records, and exclusive use of the home based on my inherited contribution and her voluntary relocation. Vanessa hired an aggressive attorney who initially claimed the pregnancy might be mine. Raymond responded with the dates of our separation, my written account, and a request for genetic testing after birth if she intended to make any claim involving me. That lie disappeared from the next filing. Ethan, meanwhile, remained absent. His wife, Laura, discovered the secret withdrawal and reported him missing before learning he had boarded the flight voluntarily. I had no intention of contacting her myself until Raymond confirmed it would not harm my case. Once he did, I mailed her a sealed packet containing only verifiable documents, photographs of Ethan entering our house, transaction dates, the investigator's confirmation of the affair, and Vanessa's written admission that he was the father. I included a short note: "I am sorry you had to learn this from a stranger. I believed you deserved facts rather than rumors. My attorney's contact information is enclosed if yours need supporting records." I did not call her. I did not demand an alliance. I did not turn another betrayed person into an instrument. 3 days later, Laura's attorney contacted Raymond. Ethan had apparently been planning to return once the initial panic passed, but Laura filed for divorce, froze the appropriate joint assets through a court order, and informed his employer that he had disappeared during an active compliance review. His company suspended him within 48 hours. That was only the beginning. Vanessa's event business depended heavily on referrals from Ethan's company. When its compliance department examined the invoices, investigators found that Ethan had approved inflated charges for 2 events, allowing Vanessa to recover money she had secretly used on hotel rooms for them. It was not an elaborate criminal conspiracy, but it was enough to terminate their contract and trigger an internal fraud review. Vanessa lost her largest client. Ethan lost his job before he even returned to Pennsylvania. Let me pause here, because revenge is often described as a flash of violence or one magnificent speech. Mine looked like folders arranged by date, receipts highlighted in yellow, and emails sent by attorneys who never raised their voices. I did not have to invent a scandal. Vanessa and Ethan had constructed one themselves. I simply stopped protecting it from daylight. Still, I wanted the truth exposed somewhere neither of them could dismiss as a private marital disagreement. The opportunity arrived through Vanessa. 6 weeks after she moved in with Denise, she announced on social media that she was expecting a baby and entering a season of courage, healing, and radical honesty. She posted a professional photograph of herself standing near Boathouse Row in a cream-colored dress, one hand over her stomach, with no mention of Ethan or the marriage she had destroyed. Friends congratulated her. Several wrote that she deserved happiness after everything she had endured. Vanessa replied with heart emojis and vague comments about escaping emotional neglect. Then she scheduled a baby shower at a restored event space in Old City and invited relatives, former clients, mutual friends, and several people from my plumbing company. I was not invited, but my sister Emily received an invitation that included a gift registry containing a $1,400 stroller, a designer crib, and a cash fund titled New Beginnings. Emily called me furious. "She's telling people you threw her out because she got pregnant," she said. "She's letting them assume the child is yours." I asked her to forward screenshots of every public statement. Raymond warned me against disrupting the shower physically, and I agreed. Walking in to shout would make Vanessa the victim she had been rehearsing to become. So I chose something cleaner. 3 days before the event, my attorney sent formal correction notices to the handful of business associates whom Vanessa had directly told that I was the father or had abandoned her during pregnancy. The notice stated that the child was conceived during her documented affair with Ethan Mercer, that Vanessa had admitted his paternity in writing, and that divorce proceedings had begun only after she continued the affair following discovery. It threatened no one. It merely requested that false statements concerning me cease. Emily privately shared the same facts with our extended family, attaching proof whenever someone accused her of gossip. By the morning of the shower, the story Vanessa had carefully packaged was splitting open. Half the guests cancelled. Her former assistant withdrew permission for Vanessa to use event photographs in her portfolio. The venue demanded immediate payment of the outstanding balance because the corporate account she expected to use had been frozen during the compliance dispute. Denise paid $3,800 from her savings rather than let the event collapse. I learned the rest from a video one of Vanessa's cousins posted before deleting it. Vanessa stood in front of a wall of white balloons, thanking the remaining guests for supporting her through abandonment. Before she could continue, Laura walked through the doors. She wore a dark blue coat and carried the gold bracelet Ethan had helped Vanessa purchase. The room went silent. Laura placed the bracelet beside the cake and said, "My husband would have delivered this himself, but he's still hiding in Arizona." Vanessa's face turned gray. Denise rushed forward, asking who she was. "I'm the wife of your grandchild's father," Laura said. Then she turned toward the guests. "And Grant Holloway is not the man who abandoned her. He is the husband she betrayed." Phones rose around the room. Vanessa shouted that Laura was harassing a pregnant woman and ordered security to remove her, but the venue had no security. Laura did not scream. She handed Denise a copy of Ethan's written admission, which his attorney had submitted during their divorce, and walked out before anyone could touch her. The entire confrontation lasted less than 2 minutes. It destroyed the final version of Vanessa's lie. That night, she called me 17 times. On the 18th, I answered. "You sent her," she said. Her voice was raw. "No. Don't lie to me. You wanted to humiliate me." I sent Laura evidence about her own husband. What she did with it was her choice. My mother spent thousands on today. My clients were there. My family was there. You invited them to celebrate a story that wasn't true. She began sobbing and said Ethan had destroyed both our lives. That was the first time she placed herself beside me rather than opposite me, but it came far too late. "Ethan didn't make vows to me," I said. "You did." I was scared. He told me he loved me. When I found out about the baby, I didn't know what to do. "So you planned to let people believe I was the father?" She did not answer. That silence confirmed more than any confession could have. If Ethan had stayed gone, Vanessa intended to use my history with the miscarriages and the social pressure surrounding her pregnancy to pull me back into the marriage. Whether she eventually revealed the truth or let me build a bond with the child first, I would never know. Some possibilities are too cruel to investigate once you already have enough reason to leave. "Grant," she whispered, "he contacted me." I waited. "Ethan says he wants to come back. He says we can fix this. Then why are you calling me? Another silence. Because I don't trust him anymore. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. That's the first sensible thing you've said in months. What Vanessa told me next changed the direction of the entire case. Ethan was not coming back for her. He wanted her to sign a statement claiming their relationship began only after he approved the disputed contracts and that every questionable expense had been a legitimate business cost. In exchange, he promised to acknowledge the baby and help financially. He was asking the pregnant woman he had abandoned to absorb part of the professional fallout he had created. Vanessa finally understood that she had never been his future. She had been an alibi he could sleep with. What should I do? She asked me. Tell your lawyer the truth. Can you come over? Please. I can't do this alone. I looked around my quiet kitchen. The flowers I had bought during my performance were long gone, the wedding photograph remained in the drawer, and the house no longer smelled like cedar cologne. You are not alone, I said. You have your mother, your attorney, and the father of your child. But you no longer have me. Then I ended the call. The next morning, Ethan landed at Philadelphia International Airport believing Vanessa would meet him near baggage claim. Instead, two corporate investigators, his wife's process server, and a reporter from a local business publication were waiting near the exit. Vanessa had forwarded every message he sent her. Ethan saw the cluster of people, turned around, and tried to walk back toward security, dragging the same suitcase he had taken to Phoenix. Someone recorded the entire scene. By lunchtime, the video was circulating among the clients who once trusted both of them. But the most damaging reckoning had not yet happened, because Ethan still believed Vanessa would protect him once he offered her the one thing she wanted most, recognition of their child. He was about to learn that fear had finally made her unpredictable. Ethan called Vanessa from an airport restroom and told her to deny everything. She recorded the conversation. I heard it months later during a settlement conference, and even then, his voice carried the calm impatience of a man who believed other people existed to absorb his consequences. Say Grant is retaliating because you left him, he told her. Tell them the invoices were accurate, the pregnancy happened after our professional relationship ended, and Laura is unstable. Vanessa asked, are you coming to see me? Ethan paused before saying, we need to control the damage first. Are you going to acknowledge the baby? Of course, eventually, but signing anything now could complicate my divorce. You promised we would be a family. Vanessa, this isn't the time to be emotional. That was the sentence that finally broke whatever loyalty she still had toward him. She had sacrificed her marriage, her reputation, and the largest contract her business possessed because Ethan made her feel chosen. The moment she became inconvenient, he reduced her to an emotional woman standing between him and self-preservation. Vanessa sent the recording to her attorney, who forwarded it to the company investigators. She also produced emails showing that Ethan had suggested disguising their hotel stays as planning expenses. Her cooperation protected her from the worst possible legal consequences, but it could not restore her business. Former clients canceled contracts, 2 employees resigned, and the local event planning association quietly removed her from its preferred vendor directory. Within 3 months, the company she had spent 6 years building was operating from Denise's dining room table with more debt than revenue. Ethan's collapse was faster. His employer terminated him for misconduct, falsifying expense approvals, and failing to cooperate with the internal investigation. Laura obtained temporary exclusive use of their house, and his sons refused to answer his calls after learning why he had vanished. He rented a furnished studio near the airport because it was the only landlord he found willing to accept several months of rent up front without current employment. The black Audi disappeared shortly afterward, either sold or repossessed. I never cared enough to find out which. Yet the loudest scandal came during a mandatory deposition related to the disputed business expenses. Ethan arrived wearing a navy suit that looked slept in and spent 2 hours minimizing his relationship with Vanessa. He called it intermittent, denied promising to leave Laura, and suggested Vanessa had misunderstood friendly conversations because she was unhappy in her marriage. Vanessa sat across the table, 6 months pregnant, listening to him reduce their affair to her delusion. Then her attorney played the airport recording. Ethan's face changed the instant his own voice filled the conference room. He glanced at Vanessa and said, "You recorded me?" She answered, "You taught me not to trust anyone." I was not present, but Raymond received the transcript. When he read that line aloud in his office, I felt no triumph. Just distance. The people who had once treated my life like an obstacle were now dismantling each other without my participation. I want to pause here because there was a point when I believed watching them fall would heal me. It did not. Justice stopped the bleeding, but it did not rebuild the part of me that had spent months questioning whether I had somehow deserved the betrayal. That work had to happen somewhere quieter. Mine began in the basement of the row house with an old brass pipe wrench that had belonged to my father. After he died, I hung it above my workbench and left his tools exactly where he had placed them. The room became a shrine instead of a workspace. One Saturday morning, I took everything down, cleaned the bench, replaced the failing lights, and drew plans for a small plumbing company of my own. I had worked for other contractors since I was 19, taking weekend jobs privately but never risking full independence. Vanessa used to say owning a business would make me even less available and that I lacked the personality to manage employees. Once she was gone, I realized how often I had mistaken her fear for wisdom. I registered Holloway Plumbing and Mechanical, leased a modest garage in East Falls, and hired Luis, a 26-year-old apprentice I had trained at my previous company. We began with 1 van, 2 ladders, and a scheduling board made from plywood. Our first major contract came from a 4-story apartment building near Temple University whose galvanized pipes were failing unit by unit. The owner knew about my divorce because Philadelphia is a city where private disasters travel faster than traffic, but he did not care. He had seen my previous work. "Can you keep the water running while you replace the risers?" he asked. "Yes," I told him. "Then the job is yours." That contract paid enough to cover 6 months of operating expenses. More importantly, it returned something I had not realized I had surrendered: belief in my own judgment. The divorce settlement followed shortly before Vanessa gave birth. Because of my documented inheritance, her continuing misconduct after discovery, and a reimbursement claim involving affair expenses, I kept the row house by refinancing the remaining mortgage in my name and paying her a limited share of the marital appreciation. Vanessa reimbursed $4,760 spent on Ethan through a reduction in her portion of the settlement. We divided retirement accounts and personal property without a trial. She initially demanded temporary support, but abandoned the request after Raymond documented that her company had paid several personal expenses and her attorney warned that deeper financial discovery could expose additional problems. She collected her remaining clothes on a rainy Tuesday with Denise and a moving company. I stayed in the garage while they worked. Before leaving, Vanessa found me beside the van and handed me the framed wedding photograph with the circular scratch across the glass. "You kept this," she said. "For a while. Does any part of you still love me?" There are questions people ask because they want truth, and questions they ask because they want access. This was the second kind. I wiped grease from my fingers with a rag and said, "I love who I believed you were. That person never existed in the way I thought she did." She looked toward the house. Pregnancy had softened her face, and for a moment, she appeared less like the antagonist in my life and more like a frightened 35-year-old woman who had burned every bridge before checking whether the man waiting on the other side intended to stay. "Ethan says he'll be involved," she told me. "I hope he is, for the child's sake. He wants a paternity test. He has the right to request one. You don't think I'm lying, do you?" I almost reminded her that her credibility was no longer my responsibility. "Instead," I said, "what I think doesn't matter anymore." She placed the photograph on my workbench and left. I threw it away that evening, not in anger, but because I finally understood that keeping it proved nothing. Vanessa gave birth to a healthy boy in November. A court-ordered test confirmed Ethan was the father. He was required to pay child support based on his earning capacity rather than the much lower salary he accepted after his termination. He visited sporadically at first, usually taking photographs he could show during legal proceedings, then moved to Nevada after finding a sales position through an old contact. Vanessa pursued enforcement when the payments became inconsistent. I heard updates through relatives even after asking them to stop sharing. The last thing I learned was that she had closed her business and begun working for a catering company outside Philadelphia. I did not celebrate that. The business had been built partly through years of honest work before she corrupted it, and the child had done nothing to deserve instability. But I also did not rescue her. Compassion did not require me to volunteer as collateral damage. Ethan attempted to contact me only once. He sent an email claiming we had both been manipulated and suggesting Vanessa had targeted him because of problems in our marriage. He ended by asking whether I possessed copies of certain messages that could harm his custody position. I forwarded the email to Raymond without replying. Ethan mistook my silence for an invitation and wrote again. Raymond answered with one sentence informing him that any further contact must pass through counsel. He never tried again. A year after I opened that bedroom door, Holloway Plumbing and Mechanical had 4 vans, 3 licensed plumbers, 2 apprentices, and a maintenance contract covering 14 residential buildings across Philadelphia. I purchased the garage we had been leasing and converted the neglected second floor into an office with exposed brick walls and windows overlooking the Schuylkill. Luis became my field supervisor. On the anniversary of my father's death, I mounted his brass pipe wrench above the office door. Beneath it, I placed a small metal plaque engraved with something he used to tell me whenever a repair looked impossible: find the valve before you break the wall. That sentence had saved far more than my house. The company gave me financial independence, but the personal reinvention mattered more. I stopped scheduling every hour of my life around somebody else's approval. I joined a boxing gym in Fishtown, took my first real vacation in 6 years, and spent 10 days driving through Maine without answering a single emergency call. I bought a weathered little fishing boat that needed almost as much repair as our old rowhouse once had. On Sunday mornings, I took it on to the Delaware with Luis or my sister's husband, and sometimes I went alone. I did date again, but slowly. I no longer confused intensity with sincerity or treated boundaries as evidence that I was cold. When a relationship felt wrong, I asked direct questions instead of supplying comfortable answers on the other person's behalf. Some people said the way I exposed Vanessa and Ethan had been brutal. Maybe it was. I sent evidence to Laura, corrected lies told about me, and allowed the truth to reach a room full of people Vanessa had invited to celebrate a false version of events. But I never fabricated a document, threatened a person, touched Ethan, or attacked Vanessa's child. Their scandal came from their own choices. My role was simply refusing to carry it quietly. 2 years later, I sold the Manayunk row house. For a long time, I had treated keeping it as victory because Vanessa had brought Ethan there and expected to push me out of it. Eventually, I realized ownership and freedom were not the same thing. Every room contained a memory I no longer needed to fight. I bought a renovated brick house in Chestnut Hill with a detached workshop and a maple tree in the backyard. The first night there, I sat on the bare kitchen floor eating pizza from the box because my furniture had not arrived. Rain tapped against the windows, and the house smelled like fresh paint instead of betrayal. There was no dramatic celebration, no audience, and nobody watching me win. I had never felt more successful. If you are waiting for me to say I found the perfect woman, married her, and replaced the family Vanessa stole from me, that is not how my story ended. I found something I had neglected long before the affair, a life that remained valuable even when nobody else validated it. I became the employer I had always wanted to work for, the brother who had time to answer calls, and the man who could sit alone in a quiet house without mistaking peace for loneliness. Vanessa once told me my work made our house look cheap. In the end, those same scarred hands built a company, protected my future, and opened the door to a home she had never touched. Before I finish, there are 5 lessons I carried out of that bedroom and into everything that followed. 1. Restraint is not weakness when it gives you time to protect yourself. Setting down that toolbox instead of swinging it kept me out of handcuffs, preserved my credibility, and allowed the facts to matter more than one explosive moment. 2. Never accept blame as a substitute for an explanation. Vanessa tried to turn my work schedule and muddy boots into causes of her affair, but unhappiness could have led to an honest conversation or a divorce. It did not force her to bring Ethan into our bed. 3. Evidence matters when somebody is already rewriting the truth. The bank statements, camera footage, and written admissions did not heal me, but they protected my home, my reputation, and my financial future when Vanessa implied I had abandoned her and the baby. 4. Do not rescue someone from the predictable consequences of betraying you. Vanessa's pregnancy deserved compassion, and her child deserved stability, but neither fact obligated me to become the husband, provider, or substitute father she needed after Ethan ran. 5. Winning is not watching the people who hurt you collapse. The real victory came when I sold the house I once fought to keep, built my own company, and stopped letting their choices define the boundaries of my life. Now I want to know what you would have done. Comment 1 if you think exposing the truth before Vanessa's baby shower was justified, comment 2 if you believe I should have kept everything inside the courtroom, or comment 3 if you would have confronted Ethan the moment you caught him. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there, because I'm always amazed by how far stories like this travel. If you stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. Leave a like, subscribe for more stories about betrayal, consequences, and rebuilding, and take care of yourself until next time. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional patterns, fully rewritten in Philadelphia to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or actual events is entirely coincidental.